Howdy folks, and welcome to my ranking of the best Ducati motorcycles of all time. Now, as many of you know, in the past couple of years, maybe past 10 years, who knows how long it's been, that I've been slowly but surely becoming a true Ducatisti. I think Ducatis are really interesting bikes. I love their race-winning pedigree. I love the fact that they are a company dedicated to going fast on road. And you may have noticed that it is Ducati week here on Yami Noob, and the reason for that is because we have our giveaway Panigale V4 on YamiNoob.co plus $2,500 cash. This is a short sweepstakes, just 7 days. By the time this video goes live, you just have a couple of days left to get entered to win. We didn't want to drag out this giveaway for months on end. We wanted to do something short, punchy, and sweet. So head over to the website, become a member, or pick up any piece of merch, and you'll get your chances locked and loaded to win. It's not often we do flagship Ducati stuff, but against the better wishes of my accountants and my bookkeepers, I decided to do a giveaway Panigale for the summer of 2026. All right, so for today's ranking, it's not going to be necessarily the most powerful Ducatis as number one or the rarest or most exotic. I kind of wanted a blend of like provenance, intrigue, design, style, performance, beauty. So, if this ranking is not to your liking, please leave me a comment down below, but it's simply my opinion on what Ducatis are best in terms of the whole overall package. Let's start off with the first one. You may be surprised that this ultra spicy limited edition model finds its way 8th on our list, but it's for good reason. It is the $1,299 Superleggera. So we're not starting off with any bitch boy regular ass V4s. We're starting off with some true exotica. So those of you who are a little bit newer in the motorcycle game might not realize that Ducati's bread and butter for decades was making twin cylinder sport bikes. It started back in the 70s, carried through the 90s with success in World Superbike, and into the 2000s and 2010s. However, as time went on, Ducati realized that their twin-cylinder bikes, no matter how big they made them, no matter how powerful they made them, just simply were not going to be competitive on the world stage. So they had to move to a V4 platform in 2017. But before they moved to a V4 platform, Ducati likes to do a cool little signature sign-off on their models, and that's exactly what the $1,299 Superleggera was. So this had the absolute king dick 1285cc Super Quadro L-twin motor, Desmo valves, and making 215 horsepower. That is an astronomical figure for a twin-cylinder bike, and the torque and power delivery of this thing is just animalistic. Superleggera, of course, for those of you who speak Italian in the audience, means super light, and so the whole ethos of this bike was ultimate lightweight. So it was the first bike to feature a full carbon everything. We're talking frame, subframe, literally everything that they could turn into carbon, they did. This bike came in at 344 pounds dry, so with fluids and stuff well under 400 pounds, so proper race bike weight experience. So the Superleggeras are very rare. Only 3 different editions of them have been made throughout the years, and only 500 of these were produced. So if you've had the chance to even see one, consider yourself lucky. If you've ridden one, well, you're even more lucky. And if you own one, well, you are part of the rarefied elite. So why did I place it 8th? Well, although Superleggeras are very cool, this one is just gorgeous in its execution. I think it's one of the best designs Ducati ever produced. I do think it's a little rare, it's a little specialized, a little crazy, and I don't think it has quite the provenance that some of the other models we're gonna talk about have. But it's truly an exceptional sign-off on the big twins, and I would love to ride one day. All right, number 7 is a bit of a cop-out. Some of you are gonna get mad at me for this, for even thinking of placing this motorcycle above something like the $1,299 Superleggera, but I have my reasons. It is the Monster 1100S. And you'll say, Yam, you literally own one of these motorcycles. You're so biased. Well, of course I am. That's why I bought it, because I think it's really neat and cool. So what makes the 1100S specifically really neat? Well, I think it represents a really great blend of kind of the greatest hits of Ducati, one of their final models that they produced before VW ownership. This was back when Ducati was a private company, which is pretty sweet. So you get a trellis frame, you get an air-cooled engine, you get Desmo valves, single-sided swing arm. It kind of is the greatest hits of what a monster is meant to be, wrapped up in a package that is modern enough to enjoy basically every day. It's not really gonna leave you stranded. The 2-valve air-cooled Ducati engines as much as people hate to admit it online, are pretty reliable. They don't really break and they're pretty robust. I put on roughly 16,000 hard miles on my Scrambler that had the 803cc L-twin air-cooled 2-valve engine, and the 1100 has the 1078cc air-cooled L-twin, 2 valves, and it just has that kind of excellent charm and character about it. I think where these really excel is that they are not super expensive to own. They have a ton of road charm and character. This bike, really, you can park it up at a cafe, have people ogle it. In fact, when I pull this thing around in parking lots, people do tend to kind of crane their heads and take a look to see what it is. Is that because my Termignoni exhausts on mine are particularly loud? Maybe, but it's still a pretty cool looking motorcycle. I think as far as road-going Ducatis go, it's a bike that you look at and immediately recognize as a Ducati, especially in its red paint. It's got the trellis frame, the big booming exhaust. It's just a classic, cool experience, and I think it definitely is one of the best Ducatis ever made. The combination of reliability, design, sound, excellent kind of purity and cool Ducati character and kind of charm about it really makes it, in my opinion, not necessarily a collector's item. These aren't the rarest Ducatis ever, but I think it just makes a great motorcycle that serves, you know, someone who really wants that classic Ducati flair, but doesn't want to put up with a bunch of the headaches. So kind of someone like me. I wanted something I could ride all the time and enjoy and really put some miles on rather than painstakingly taking care of it in my garage. All right, next on the list is going to be a polar opposite of the Monster 1100S. Stay tuned. All right, this is another one I've mentioned at great length throughout my years here on the channel because I do think it's one of the most interesting, bespoke, small run production motorcycles that Ducati ever made, and it is the Supermono. So back in the 90s, Ducati was participating in a championship called the Sound of Singles. It was sort of a one-off bespoke racing series designed for single-cylinder, ultra-lightweight motorcycles, and that's exactly what this thing is. So they only made about 65 of these things, but it represents to me Ducati's commitment to just building interesting race-winning exotica. So first of all, this motorcycle is beautiful in my opinion. The lines, the styling, the way that it just sits there, it looks like it's fast going still, and that is a hallmark of beautiful Ducati sport bikes. And basically what they did is they took their 1188cc twin and just lopped off a cylinder and ran it as a single cylinder motorcycle, which is kind of similar to what they've done in the new Hyper Mono, the new motard that they have, where they basically took a Panigale twin and just lopped off the rear cylinder. And I think that's kind of an interesting way to design an engine. So you get a crazy wide fat bore and a tiny little stroke because it came from a race bike engine. And what they did as well was they designed a sort of dummy connecting rod so that it actually didn't shake itself apart. And if you can believe it, this motorcycle weighs just 267 pounds, making it an incredibly featherweight, borderline like 125cc Grand Prix style motorcycle. Obviously it doesn't have the two-stroke ring-ding-ding to it, but it does have that torquey single cylinder. And if you are lucky enough to ride one of these on track, it's gotta be a blissful experience. So for the strangeness of the Supermono, the kind of race pedigree that it had, the look and vibe of it, the fact that it's so unique and different, I had to place it right around 6 in our list. But because they are so rare and so exceedingly strange, I've never seen one in person. I'll probably never see one in person, let alone ride one in anger on track. I think that's gonna be a pretty tall order. Servicing these would be heinously expensive and difficult as well to even find someone to properly do the service on one of these. They're definitely reserved as museum pieces, but I think it represents a really cool chapter in Ducati's history. All right, following along on that theme, this bike was actually produced in much larger numbers than the Supermono. They only made 65 Supermonos and they made 1,500 of these bikes, but these are also like, I can't even believe Ducati made this bike. This is of course the 2008 Ducati Desmosedici RR. So if you weren't around at the time, it was a really big deal when Ducati won the 2007 Riders' Championship in MotoGP with Casey Stoner at the helm. Ducati had never won a championship. I know that's kind of hard to believe given their recent dominance in MotoGP, but this was a time that was dominated by Honda and Yamaha, specifically with Valentino Rossi. So when Casey Stoner won in 2007, it represented sort of a seismic wave shift, total vibe shift in the entire motorcycle industry. And Ducati loves to celebrate. That's one thing you're probably going to notice in today's video is Ducati loves capping off special editions of their bikes. They love creating cool end of runs, and the 2008 Desmosedici RR was exactly that. So what was this motorcycle? This was quite literally a road legal MotoGP bike. I'm not even kidding. That's not marketing speak. That's not, oh, it's a homologated superbike. No, they literally made their MotoGP bike as close as they possibly could as a production bike and sold it. So this was their first road-going V4, but it was the MotoGP-derived V4. So a 989cc V4 Desmosedici, which in case you don't know, Desmo is for desmodromic valves and Sedici is 16, so 16 desmodromic valves. There you go, you learned something today. And of course, it made 200 horsepower with the race kit, which also serves to underscore just how far we've come, that the ultra limited edition special MotoGP-based bike back in the mid-2000s made 200 horsepower, where now you can just go get any number of liter bikes that make that kind of power. It had gear-driven camshafts, full carbon fiber everywhere, and it was just completely absurd. And for my money too, I still think it's one of the best looking Ducatis ever made. I mean, it literally looks like a real race bike. And this was before all the crazy aerodynamic stuff in MotoGP. And so this bike just has that streamlined, beautiful shape to it. And the kind of swing arm and the subframe just has that really purposeful prototype bike look about it. Now, despite the fact that 1,500 of these were made, they're pretty rare to see out and about on the roads too. I think I've only seen a few videos here and there of them. They tend to be relegated to mostly collector's pieces, so because it's not that accessible, they tend to command crazy prices too. To even run and operate one of these bikes, you need a lot of special equipment, a lot of special maintenance, so this is not a bike you're gonna be throwing around on the weekends at the canyons. And keep in mind, despite this being a V4 Ducati, this was from the mid-2000s. This thing is animalistic, raw, insane, and not gonna be easy to ride. The new V4 products are incredibly easy to whip around on track, and they're very flattering for even someone like myself, an A-group track day rider, former club racer kind of guy. You're not gonna jump onto Desmosedici RR and go rip up lap times that are even comparable to any modern day leader bike. So this is really more of like a, you wanna buy it as a museum piece, you wanna buy it as something you're gonna enjoy just to look at and listen to and tell the story about Casey Stoner's awesome triumphs in the 2007 MotoGP Championship. So very cool bike, tons of cool history, tons of cool provenance, and one of the most special Ducatis ever made. All right, going way back in time to 1974, we are talking about the Ducati 750 SS. Now, many of you know on the channel here, I tend to focus on, pretty much like 90s, 2000s. That's as far back as I go in the catalogs. But really, when you're studying motorcycles and understanding the history of how brands transcended and came through over time, you have to sometimes go a little further back. In the 1974 750 SS, it was one of those very important motorcycles that every Ducatisti and student of motorcycling should understand. So this was a street legal replica of Paul Smart's 1972 Imola 200 winning motorcycle. So it has that kind of like, race replica, homologated type of vibe. This is a real race bike sort of thing, the thing Ducati is known best for. So we're talking similar to the 1299 Superleggera, the Desmosedici RR, but this is really where the story begins for Ducati. Because before that point, in the 50s and 40s, Ducati emerged as a post-war motorcycle manufacturer. They used to make radio parts, and so they started making simple single-cylinder little things for people to get around. And once they started racing and once they developed this first twin-cylinder race bike, that's really where things started taking off. Because the whole concept of a V-twin style race bike in the way that they made it was kind of unheard of at the time. It had the round case 90-degree V-twin, I guess L-twin if you want to be pedantic about it, and it did debut the desmodromic valves for the first time on a production bike. So all of the hallmarks that we love about Ducati was first found on the 750 SS. So this is obviously a huge collector's item. People love owning these to have a piece of history, and they want usually the one with the green frame. That's the one people always go to. And then there's also the translucent strip on the gas tank so that racers could actually keep track of their fuel levels while they were riding. So much of this motorcycle is just beautiful, and you understand where Ducati came from, and it just tells a wonderful story, and that's why it's pretty far up on the list. And if you wanted to talk about important Ducatis, it may be the most important, probably alongside the Monster and maybe the 916. Those are probably the holy trinity of important Ducatis. But the 750 SS, beautiful, important, cool, collectible, and if you see one, you spotted a bit of a unicorn. Alrighty, podium places. Number 3 of my list of best Ducatis of all time. It is none other than the 916 SPS. So the 916 platform for Ducati. This was the most race-winning setup that they ever had. This bike went through several iterations, receiving larger engines throughout its tenure, but this bike holds the crown for, as a kind of chassis and frame, the most wins of any Ducati product basically ever. The 916 is commonly thought of as the most beautiful motorcycle ever made. It's hard to disagree with that statement, but the SPS that was released later in its tenure was truly, I think, the model variant that you'd want to get. And so why is that? Well, the SPS received the 996cc L Twin, the larger punched out version of the original 916cc that was found in the first bikes, and they made 130 something horsepower, which at the time was a ton. This was also the bike that served as the homologated race bike at the time too, so you could purchase one of these and then go on track and have about as close to a real race bike experience as you could have in the day. The SPS was famously ridden to victory by Carl Fogarty. It's a motorcycle that has a ton of provenance, and truly to me, it's probably the 916 that is most sought after. Even though SP variants of the 916 are more rare, not many more made, they made way more SPSs, but the SPS is the better bike. It's got the bigger engine, it's got better suspension, it's just got a little bit of better everything. And so one of the most iconic Ducati race bikes ever made, one of the most interesting looking bikes ever made. It's hard to argue about the provenance of the 916 SPS, and not only its performance as well too. And it's sort of crazy, right? 130 horsepower back in the day was like, wow, this thing's nuts. But I'll tell you, having ridden a 916 with that 996 engine, this bike actually is quite potent. It's not gonna be rip your face off fast like the new V4 products, but because it's raw, analog, and a bit difficult to ride, it just makes it way more rewarding when you really get it right. And then you really consider how heroic those original riders were back in the day to ride bikes with no electronics, no TC, no ABS, just completely bare bones missiles. So yeah, beautiful analog vibes. The SPS is just a gorgeous machine. Has to be one of the coolest Ducati race bikes ever made. All right, second place, what I think is the penultimate best Ducati ever made. It's a bike I came extremely close to purchasing last year before I settled on my Ducati Monster 1100S because it's just simply a bit too precious, a bit too crazy. And I thought that I'd want something a little simpler. It is, of course, the Ducati Monster S4RS. Now, I did a whole video on the Ducati Monster, the whole lineage, which one you should get, and I think the S4RS stands alone as one of the coolest, most interesting, most compelling naked bike platforms that Ducati ever put together. Now, why is that? So, the S4 was launched in the early 2000s to commemorate Ducati's success in World Superbike. It originally launched as a special edition for Carl Fogarty, who was a very successful racer back in the day. So the S4 utilized basically the Superbike engine dropped into the Monster. This was the first time they put a liquid-cooled Superbike-derived motor into the Monster's frame. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Monster was originally designed from a proper sport bike frame, but it's a parts bin Frankenstein motorcycle. So this was the first time they put together a proper, powerful liquid-cooled engine into this frame. And really, this architecture and framework was kind of ahead of its time. Because what we think of as hyper-naked motorcycles nowadays really kind of started around here. You know, a super powerful engine put into a naked bike, and then the RS trim takes it up even further with Olin suspension and other fancy bits. It also came equipped with ultra lightweight Marchesini wheels, and most people tend to think of this monster, this specific variant, as the ultimate predator, the ultimate apex machine of the first run of monsters that started way back in the 90s. So you were pushing 130 horsepower out of this liquid-cooled engine, no electronics, no ABS, no traction control, nothing at all, completely raw analog and pure. So those of you who have ridden this bike will understand that it is quite a handful. So this thing really pushed the envelope for me of what naked bikes could be, because before that, naked bikes were kind of seen as like, it's not a sport bike, it's a street fighter, you crashed your sport bike and turned it into a naked bike. You know, this bike, along with probably the KTM Super Duke, set the tone of what a truly powerful, crazy, torque-first kind of motorcycle could be in a naked bike chassis. So these are super cool. They're accessible enough to people own them. They're not so insane to like, you know, maintain and ride if you're used to, you know, 916 maintenance. So obviously this has, you know, 4 valves per cylinder. It is Desmodromic, but at least it's all accessible and naked. You're not gonna be futzing through a bunch of plastic. And so I think this represents an awesome experience and a truly rarefied sort of Ducati road-going experience. All right, what do I think is the best Ducati of all time? Now, this choice that I'm about to tell you guys, again, it's not the fastest, the rarest, the most expensive, or anything like that. I just think it's a bike that was ahead of its time, kind of different, thought about things in a different way, and I honestly think the market has since proved that people really like these motorcycles, and I'm talking about the Paul Smart 1000 Sport Classic from the mid-2000s. So, what was this motorcycle? So Ducati wanted to commemorate the 750 SS. They wanted to commemorate Paul Smart's Imola win. So what they did was they kind of cashed in on the nostalgia thing that was happening in the early 2000s, mid-2000s. Triumph re-released their Bonneville. Ducati was releasing this thing. There was a time where, you know, cafe racers and the allure of the 60s, people were really into that. And it's weird that people still think we're really into that. It's been like 20 years after that point now. But regardless, it kind of seems like every 20 years, we're like, what about cafe racers? Okay, but the Paul Smart 1000 is really cool. And I think it's the real deal, and it represents an incredible, incredible Ducati motorcycle that, much like the Monster 1100S, just has like the greatest hits. So first of all, the bike is just so pretty. Can we all just be in agreement about that? The frame, the bodywork, the vibes, the build, it's just, ooh, that's a good looking motorcycle. And that does it for a lot of people. You know, something this beautiful, this unique, this is the sort of motorcycle that when you roll this thing out onto the road and you go out for a ride, you may convert 1 or 2 kids who see this motorcycle, who have never seen anything that looks that cool. So this was powered by the then new at the time 1000cc L-twin motor that was being used in the Monster and the Multistrada. So it was a bit of a cross-platformed engine. But, you know, at the time that was kind of like, oh, this is just Ducati shoving in their engine. Nowadays, that 1000cc air-cooled twin, well, it feels positively vintage and retro. Things moved on so quickly in the kind of liquid-cooled and performance sense of the word, and Ducati only makes the 803cc air-cooled twin in the Scramblers nowadays, so this old 1000cc twin is kind of unique. But here's the thing, you know, if you were to try to go buy and run a 750 SS, functionally impossible to keep that motorcycle running and, you know, properly riding. I'm sure many of you out there are now commenting, being like, no, of course it is. You can totally have one of these and own it for a long time. But here's the thing, like, much like the Monster 1100S, much like the other bikes on this list, this bike blends a modern performance and modern reliability, but not too much, but it kind of gives you that 70s styling. I really think there was a kind of golden spot where in the mid-2000s, they were harkening back to old school stuff, but they didn't have tech that was so advanced at the time. So even when they were making stuff that was really advanced or crazy, they couldn't really do it to bikes like this. So to me, it just represents an incredible blend of modern and retro wrapped up in a beautiful package that pays homage to Ducati's history, that gives you nearly all of the hallmarks of what a Ducati is meant to be as well. So Desmo valves, air-cooled, gorgeous in its execution. I mean, the frame alone is just a thing of beauty. The silver paint and the green with the gold fork, it's a lovely thing. And so to me, the fact that these aren't stratospherically expensive, not too crazy to own, look incredibly beautiful and unique, hit the perfect balance of like modern and classic. Yes, they're a touch uncomfortable to ride. I mean, if you think about the riding position on a Paul Smart 1000, you're like, I probably wouldn't want to ride that thing more than like, 40 or 50 miles. But still, in those 40 or 50 miles is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I don't know, maybe a controversial pick, but I do think the Paul Smart 1000 Sport Classic is one of the coolest Ducatis ever made. All right, so what do you guys think of my ranking? Am I totally off base here? Am I a false Ducatisti? Would you have obviously placed the Superleggera top? Would you get the brand new Panigale V4 as the best one of all time because of the best performance? Hey, all of this is just my own opinion. I'm just having fun here. And of course, I did also want to remind you, I know you probably saw it at the beginning of the video, our Panigale V4 giveaway, it's live for just a couple more days. I don't do these that often, these insane 7-day giveaways, especially not for a flagship Ducati. Literally everyone advised me not to do it. I did it anyways because I wanted to do something cool for this riding season. Get your once-in-a-lifetime chance to win that motorcycle and $2,500 cash on our website, yamanoob.co. Become a member, pick up some piece of merch, and get entered to win. Thanks so much for checking out today's video. I appreciate it. I'll catch you in the next one.